Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Hi. So I know we're a bit delayed because the 9 o'clock service went a little long with baptism. So we're going to go ahead and get started, okay? So welcome to All Saints Church's second annual Pentecost Poetry Showcase and panel discussion presented during this morning's forum. This showcase and discussion with the poets is to honor the 2-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder. Last year, Monique and I established this time of poetic offering as a way to commemorate the life of George Floyd, as well as celebrate the truth that all Black lives matter. Our featured poet, Arielle Estoria, has, at the 9 o'clock service, and will, for the 11:30 service, offer 3 poems during the worship experience. And during this time, we will have Tiny Red, Monique Thomas, and Reverend Mark Chase open up our time with some original pieces, which will speak to themes associated with Blackness, grief, injustice, joy, hope, pride, resilience, and collective purpose. We hope that through the offering of their presence and words that you will experience the cultural power and pride which people of African descent have demonstrated for centuries and which we use for fuel for our personal and collective resistance and liberation. Our hope and prayer is for the flow of creative expression offered through poetry on this Pentecost Sunday will draw you into the pain, the despair, the resilience, the determination, the cultural strength which people of African descent have experienced for centuries and which we continue to use for our liberation. And now for All Saints' own Tiny Red.
Humanity first. It's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. When we outlaw war and feed the poor. When justice and equality lead the poor. When we respect workers so that sweatshops and contracting out exist no more. When we eradicate destruction and greed. When no one extorts us human needs. There's no corporation. She has the right to own her land on trees. Because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. Without them across the border, taking water. Without them occupying soil, still the order. When no one uses deadly forces to rob a country's resources and justify it with a wicked crisis, because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. If you call my dream a fantasy and you don't want to work for the possibility for it to become a reality, you must be my enemy. But I bring peace, love, and sympathy because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. I won't take your gun, but should everyone have an automatic one? Do you have a gun to hide your hate and insecurity? I want to take all weapons and melt them into jewelry so we can fight poverty because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. Wow. We celebrate every December, but then don't remember, part of the greatest commandment meant to be, you see, I'm to love my neighbor as I love me. And the Lord also said, as you do to the least of these, you do to me. That's why I don't vote for those who cut programs socially, because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. Our priorities are such a mess, like the collapse of the factory in Bangladesh. Greed and humanity just don't mesh. You can't put a price on human flesh. We could come together and have a worldwide tranquility if we focus on equality, because it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family, help me. It's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family, it's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. One more. It's about humanity. When the human race becomes the human family. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tiny Red. Now we'll have Monique Thomas.
Eight minutes, 46 seconds. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. I still remember the day I clenched my fist, I grabbed my heart, I stood and I watched 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and I tried to breathe. My mind started to wander, and I go through, and I was remembering all of my own past and memories in that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I saw that body, that black body on the ground, and I was reminded of Middle Passage. The images that I've seen of black bodies pushed together, chained. There was no Ellis Island. They did not see Lady Liberty welcoming them, waiting to breathe free, for they could not breathe at all. They yearned for freedom, and they yearned to breathe. My grandfather was born in 1892. I graduated high school in 1992, so I've always been interested in that year and what was happening 100 years before I became a woman and out into the world. In 1892, it was the year of the highest number of lynchings. My grandfather was born in the South, and every day I think, as I'm in this body, that I may not even be here at all. Because the lynching of taking black bodies and stringing them up like the strange fruit that Billie Holiday sung of, taking away their life, their soul, their essence, and their ability to breathe. I stood there and I watched, and I couldn't even move. I thought about being a little girl when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, and the lights go out, and I'm holding a little white girl's hand. And my teacher says, "Where are you, Susie? Where are you standing?" And she says, "I'm holding the hand of the little nigger girl." And I remember the shame that ran through my body and how I wanted to just disappear, and I couldn't breathe. I want Jesus to walk with me. I want Jesus to walk with me. I turn off the screen and I walk outside to the sun. I'm looking for the sun. I'm looking for some sort of a peace and some meaning in all these things that are happening. The sun hits my body and I feel the warmth of it on my cocoa brown skin. I feel my hair reaching and edging and resiliency and resistance. Because y'all, my hair doesn't lay flat. The curls will not stay flat. The curls rise up in resistance. They're reaching towards the sun. My skin is reaching towards the sun. My soul is reaching towards the sun. I'm trying to connect. And I'm realizing that my act of resistance is standing here in the sun. And I'm standing on the bodies, the memories, the souls, the hearts of all those who have come before me, of Wosley, my grandfather, of Sandra Bland, of Philando Castillo, of George Floyd. I will resist. You will not take my joy. You will not take my life. You will not take my breath. Because my act of resistance, brothers and sisters, my siblings, my act of resistance is my breath. Thank you.
Ashe. And now we have Reverend Mark Chase.
I'll grab one. It's going to be a little hard. Okay, is that better? Okay. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for being here. This piece I'm going to read is entitled Before the Water. I'm going to try to say water in my non-New York accent, but it's going to be real hard. It's going to be real hard. So just get ready. Water. Before the water. Before the water, we had wisdom. Before the water, we had words. Before that water of bondage, We had our own waters that took us home and not away from it. We had a song before it was stolen. We had the banjo before it was painted over in blackface. How else could we arrive with such strength to sing a new song in a strange place? We had metaphors and similes in Yoruba, italicized our excellence in Igbo. Ashanti alliteration advocated our Imago Dei. I wonder if African bishops beatboxed over the gospel before it ever made its way to Europe. That flow sits in our bones. The water didn't bring us the wave, we brought the wave to the water. That's how it got so choppy. It felt our rhythm and in unison testified to the disorder. We are a proud people carrying songs silently inside with inner wisdom. We are a loud people echoing the joy of our ancestors with our own diction, long legacies of lyricism. I wonder if hip hop came from our horn long before it ever got to Harlem. Maybe they breakdanced in Botswana before the Bronx. Maybe MCing came from the Mandinka. What if Tupac spoke Swahili and Kendrick clicked in Kosa before the West Coast? KRS-One embodying the wisdom of Sankofa. Master P rocking his jewels like Mansa Musa. Nefertiti sparking intuition in Lauren long before her miseducation. See, we been had a song. We been had a flow. We had poetry and we had prose. And from that strength, what arose was what got us through, what gets us through. The resistance came from royalty and roots. Don't let them fool you. Don't let them fool us. We been had bars because we been had us. Notes from long ago, buried internal, making me wonder when we make our music, are we just looking in our journals? The words we wrote before the water.
Wow, that was powerful, Chase. Thank you. Pour the water. So we're going to have just a discussion for you all to get to know the artist and to think about what this commemoration of George Floyd's, the anniversary of his murder, means to them. So let's just kick it off with that. How has the murder of George Floyd impacted or informed your artistry?
I can start. I struggled to write this piece. Brunel and I kicked off Pentecost Poetry Slam last year, and I knew that we wanted to do it this year. Chase came to us and said, we're making it annual, right? We're going to do this again. And I was like, yeah, and actually I want to speak this year. I want to be one of the poets. And immediately I didn't know what I would write about because it was just so, it involved me going back into that pain. It involved the first few minutes of seeing what was happening, of seeing this body. But I knew that I wanted to celebrate George Floyd, and I knew that I wanted to link that story of what happens to Black bodies to a larger story and a larger, and even in my own family, my own experiences. So it took a while, but the process was there was some meditation, there was some music, there was some gospel music I listened to try to center myself, because I thought of it more of, I want to honor George, so I want to do this. And I even, like yesterday, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if emotionally I can do this. But it was important, and so that was part of my journey.
I think for me, it gives a purpose to what I do and to the poetic gift. I've been writing since I was like 10, 11 years old. And Tupac said this once. Tupac said, you know, if you really want to understand, or if people really want to understand and grasp concepts and justice and theology and all, it's going to be up to the artists, because the artists are the ones that translate all of this other stuff and bring it down to where we all can breathe it in. And so for me as an artist, it gives a purpose to what I've been gifted with, and it reminds me to steward that gift because I feel like I'm a translator. Like that's what I feel like, and especially as an Enneagram 4, like, you know, I feel a lot of feelings, and I think Arielle, you're a 4 too, so you get it. We have this innate ability to translate the emotions and the experiences that are happening in the world around us and in other people for the rest of the world. And so when I think about our dear brother George, and when I think about murders like his and other lynchings like his, it gives a purpose because I see myself as a holy translator of emotions and grief and pain and trauma and hope and joy that are trapped in us that we might not be able to articulate.
Yeah, I think similarly, in a very tangible and literal sense, I don't think I can write or speak about the concept of breath or breathing in the same way, you know, without it giving some type of memoriam to his passing. And in that same way, it's like being able, like Chase is saying, not only being able to articulate and to express artistically, but also in the same sense of like being able to like breathe and speak on behalf of him, you know, like in memoriam of him. And so I think just very literally, I don't think I can write breath or write breathing without paying tribute to the lack that he was able to breathe. Yeah.
For me, it was personal. It reminded me of my best friend. Before Rodney King, the story in Los Angeles was the murder of Oliver X. Beasley. And it was when at his funeral, Maxine Waters came, and Jenny Bakewell, and Minister Farrakhan, and I didn't appreciate all of that at the time because for me, that was my brother. He was a friend I talked to on a daily basis. So it brought me back to that, and then to 92 when we had the uprising. So when this one happened, I thought this uprising was an improvement. Not that it was a good thing, but it was an improvement in that we burned down where the establishment was instead of our own, where the establishment. And so I thought it was an improvement because, yes, the anger was there, and that is what resurfaced. And so my writing comes a lot of that. And I used to only write to myself and show my dad, and he said, "You need to show this to people." And I thought, people would think I'm crazy, and which wasn't too far from the truth. But he said, "You'll find you're not alone."
Yeah. Monique kind of connected to this next question. I would love to hear from all of you, maybe even elaborate more. What things do you do to help your creative expression to find itself? I know you mentioned listening to gospel music as well as meditation, and just to take care of yourself in the midst of connecting to our collective trauma in a way to be that translator, holy translator. What kinds of things do you do to create, but also to take care of your spirits?
I call it protecting my personhood. I water my plants. I wash my hair. I go outside, you know, just little, like very simple things to like whatever refilling my cup looks like in that moment. Sometimes it's just going to the beach, specifically in winter at night. I don't know what that is, but it's a very spiritual space for me. I'm like a weird person. I go to the beach year round. Like I just need it. Like the waves are like my very literal spiritual cup, and so that's a huge part of it. And then just being with people. I'm such, like Chase was saying, I'm such an empath. I'm such a feeler, but I kind of say I'm a sponge. Like I just need to sit and be with good people, and those conversations are like so electrifying. And a lot of times it's like, I'm so sorry, I need to like go write something down really quick. Not to be rude, not to come back to this, but I think that's a huge part of it. And in the poem I shared this morning, McDonald Park. There's just something about that park. My husband and I, we brought our dinner and had dinner there last night and just sat. It just is a really beautiful place. So outdoors, I think, is a huge space for me to be filled up before I can pour out to that capacity. Yeah.
Of your process. You got it more down than me. I'll just share quickly that I think one of the things that I do, aside from, I love that phrase, protecting my personhood. So I do that through meditation and just breathing, just trying to be as still as possible, which is difficult for me. I'm bouncing around and I'm always moving, and I'm always got something going on. But I try my best to stay still and to be still, even if it's for 5 minutes, because I know, especially with 2 little toddlers, that might be the only 5 minutes of stillness I get if I don't get it right now. So stillness, but then also too, just listening to. I get so much inspiration just listening to other poets, listening to other rappers, and I pull from so many different streams. Like there's so many times where things I'll say in a sermon, which I feel like I'm always writing poetry even in sermons, but there's something that I'll pull, and that was like from a battle rap from the Bronx in like 2012, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And then I get like a rhyme scheme and a structure, and then I put my words into that rhyme scheme and structure, and nobody will know that was inspired by a battle rap but me. And it's this beautiful feeling of being connected to my true self, because we might get some battle rap up in here, but in the meantime, we're gonna have some sermons influenced by battle rap. So for me, it's just listening. It's just listening to other people, and because everybody's got bars, everybody's got flow, and it's also inspirational. So yeah.
I'd actually like to see you and Elizabeth Lashley Haynes do a battle rap.
She raps, or she's done that.
You did remember?
Oh yeah, that's right, at the karaoke. That was
karaoke. Yeah, we need more karaoke here for Joy too.
That was a wild moment. I forgot that happened.
That was so much fun. Yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, meditation, and what's interesting is, as I'm listening, so I'm going to 11:30 service, so Arielle, I haven't heard you speak yet, but you were talking about breath and all of us. There seems like there's such a through line through what we were doing, and we've not talked about what we were presenting today, none of us as artists, but there was something bigger that connected us, and that's the beauty of it, and I think that's the beauty of silence, is I'm always trying to connect to other people, and in my art, express what I'm feeling, but also on a bigger feeling of what other folks might be feeling too. I'm also an empath, and it's really awful sometimes because you just take in so much, and it's why I decompress by being by myself, because I need to just shake off all that energy that I brought in from other things. But stillness is hard for me, but that I try to do that. I try to meditate and be still. I try to drink water. I don't like water, but I know that I need to drink more water. Teas at night, just kind of just being silent and listening to what God is telling me, the universe is telling me, and settle myself in so that I can give more to others.
I've gotten more spiritual. I actually have gone online on my phone and listened to other people and heard sermons and heard things about your gift. And about you have a gift, and your gift is what you're supposed. I'm like, wow, I never knew this. And of course, the jazz. And then I've also learned silence. I've heard to pray and then to meditate and have silence. Sometimes he goes, we never listen to ourselves. We never listen to the response. We pray and we ask, but we never listen for the response. We turn on the radio when we get in the car, boom, 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 boom. There's noise. Hey, let's walk to the store instead of, why don't you walk alone? Think to ourselves. And I've learned to have silence. And recently I've been watching this old comedy. I haven't seen it. I'm way slow on TV, but it's called Cheers. And I sit and I purposely put time aside before I go to bed, and I watch that, and I laugh, and I live alone, and I'm laughing. That helps.
Oh, it's so beautiful. We need the laughter, right? We need the laughter. There's also a thread that's kind of, to use the word that you just used, Monique, a thread that's coming through in terms of you aren't overtly saying God, but I want to hear from each of you in terms of the ways in which your image and experience of God has been impacted and or transformed since George Floyd's murder.
Oof. I mean, that week alone, I got married. I got married in COVID. I lost, I lost my uncle. And then we got back and George Floyd happened. And so it was like, meanwhile, we're in a global pandemic. I mean, it was just thing after thing after thing. And all that encapsulated in this season of my life where a lot of my faith was shifting and how I saw and perceived God was shifting, and that showed up in who I married and why I married him. And that was very triggering for my family. So it was all these things, thing after thing after thing, that just like combusted. And so in that season, it was just a reminder of like how I grew up in this very boxed in evangelical space. Like there has to be a bigger story here because there's too many things happening for there not to be a bigger story. And it was, I mean, that was the week where I realized how much, again, breath, but in the same breath, we hold both grief and both joy all in the same moment. And how do we give space to both? How do we give recognition to both? So I could celebrate one day, grieve another day, and then sit outside of City Hall and be silent for 8 minutes another day. And it was just like you had to hold both and all. And so in that, I think I just saw this expansive view of God versus this very limited one that I had been raised with for the past 30 years. And it was just that in that space was just this 2 years of just like this, something's shifting, you know? And in that season, this like melody kept reoccurring in my head, and it was just, God is doing a new thing. 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 If you blink, you'll miss it. If you blink, you'll miss it. God is doing a new thing. God is doing a new thing. And that was like, I think that was the pivot of that season, was just there's new things happening and we cannot keep up to it, and we cannot try to track it or what it is and how it's working. And I think that was really just the season where this concept of who God is and what God was doing just combusted in really heart-wrenching and also really eye-opening ways at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you, Arielle.
I don't want to share after Arielle. That was, wow. I seriously, I just want to sit and just bask in that, and even that melody. But yeah, I think for me, and I said this yesterday at the march in Pasadena, I went to George Floyd Square last year on the 1 year. It's hard to find a word, right? Because anniversary doesn't sound right, you know? It's just the 1 year mark or commemoration of his murder. And in the street, they have angels' wings in the spot where he was lynched. And then there's a memorial that the community made themselves. Like, this wasn't, you know, a museum, or, you know, it was the community was bringing items, you know, out that were meaningful to them as it pertained to justice and Black joy and liberation and freedom. And in the midst of this memorial, they blocked off the streets. And so a good friend of mine, Janelle Austin, she is the primary caretaker of George Floyd Square. And at the time, the streets were still blocked off. They were still barricaded, again, by the community. The city did not make this decision. The community said this. They said, no justice, no streets. No justice, no streets. And this is a And that was eye-opening for me to be in that square because I didn't realize that this is a major thoroughfare and a major intersection in Minneapolis, and buses and cars and all sorts of traffic. And they're like, no justice, no streets. No justice, no streets. And so for me, what it connected me back to was this reality that God doesn't forget the blood that's on the ground, even when capitalism wants to rush us past it. Right? And the city wanted those streets open. They tried so many times in the middle of the night to kind of remove things and take things out under the cover of night. But for me, it was this reminder that God doesn't forget, and the streets and places themselves hold the memory of the ones whose lives have been taken by white supremacist violence, right? And so I shared that yesterday as well in Pasadena, in the spot and place where Ernesto Jimenez, who we were honoring yesterday, was murdered. But for me, it didn't enlarge anything. If anything, I went through a phase where I was pissed. And there's a writing by I think his name Martin Jones. But the title of the book is It's a Question of Theodicy, and he's asking the question, is God a white racist? You know, and it's just like, come on, like enough is enough. Like, I think it's time we just ask that. Like, you know, like, is God a white race? So I went, if anything like changed, I went that way and just asking those types of questions, like God, can I hold you accountable for the history of how of anti-blackness, not just here in America, but worldwide? Like God, what is going on? Like, do you get off on this? Like, what is happening? Are you a white racist? Like, we got to be able to ask those types of questions. So I went to that place, and then I kind of bounced back to this place, and then so I'm holding it all in tension, right? And the thing that gives me hope is the body and person of Jesus, right? That is the thing that grounds me and gives me such hope, because Jesus was in a brown body and lived the black experience, right? And so that tethers me and holds me on. But there's moments and times where I'm asking that question, like let's be real, like, God, are you a white racist? What is happening here? But anyway, I'm a drone on and on and on, and I've already preached this morning, and I'll preach on one more time, so I will pass the time. But for me, I think it was just a holy and sacred reminder that the streets have memory, and that God doesn't rush us past that blood that's in the ground, like was spoken and said in Genesis, right? That's the first place sin is used and named in Scripture, is actually after Cain murders Abel, right? It's not after the fall, it's after that, where sin is named as sin, when Abel is murdered, right? So, yeah, the streets have memory, and God holds us accountable to remember that.
And God can handle our anger, our questions, our confusion.
Yes.
When you said that the streets have a memory, I just had a visceral response, because a few years ago, we took a civil rights pilgrimage. We took the Traverse here at All Saints, and myself and others went. And we went to Ferguson. That was one of the stops that we went to, and we actually saw where Michael Brown died. And the street had been repaved because he had lost so much blood that they had to dig up the street and repave it because of the blood. And we're standing there on the grounds of where this young man died, and all of a sudden an ice cream truck drives by. The most innocent sound, right? And on the ice cream truck is the face of this cherub face of a little black boy. And I still get chills when I think about that, because it was just this representation of this innocence. He was someone's innocent child. And you're standing there, literally standing on his blood where it's been repaved. And that was just, but in terms of the faith, I was overwhelmed, because I've mentioned before, I've lost both my parents when I was young, 13 and 16. And I live alone, and I have a very full life here in LA, and I do a lot. But being in isolation, the racial reckoning, at the time I work in racial justice work, and I was the only black person in my department, and so I'm having to be the voice of my people in a space where people were like, we never knew, like, racism is a thing here in America, what? So I'm having to lead. I remember doing a training on the history of black people in America while still trying to process my own stuff. You know, it just was, yeah. And I feel like that was some residual trauma that I'm just finally feeling and realizing. Like, I was traumatized over and over in this situation. But my relationship with God, what I realized is I had been filling my life with noise, with people and activities. And during COVID, I wasn't able to do that, and it was just me and God. and I had to lean. It was like, I don't have anything left. I can't do this in my own strength and my own power. And I'm still doing that now, to where I'm like, I need to lean. I need you. My relationship with God has gotten strengthened because, COVID's happening, all these things are happening, and Black men are getting killed. And finally, the world is recognizing it. We're having conversations we never had before. I'm having to face it in ways I never had before. I'm thinking about my nephews growing up in the South. Are they safe? Are they just so many things? And so just, long story short, that was, it forced me to really dive into my faith and to really lean, because I was like, I don't have the answers and I don't know what to do, and I'm not coping well with this mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And so, yeah, it just reminded me to lean.
I leaned, I was looking for love. I was giving it in ways, and looking for it. Although we didn't meet the racial justice ministry, we would meet through Zoom. So I got to see people through Zoom. And that was like sometimes the only way. And I asked one about her husband. I made, friends with her husband, and I wanted somebody to have solace with, who I can also receive counsel from. And so I reached out in that way. And there are people here that I've emailed and texted, and, hey, are you okay? What do you need? And tried to put it that way through service.
Thank you.
And cover my pain in service.
Yeah, thank you. And for the final question, okay, I know Chase.
Do you have to?
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, wonderful. There's a thread that's coming through. You spoke of magic in one of your poems earlier, and I feel like collectively, one of the ways in which we have an opportunity to tap into magic is our ancestral connections. And so I want to hear about the ways in which you connect and honor your ancestors and what that looks like and how it informs also your artistry.
It's funny, I was just having this conversation with my spiritual director, and he was reminding me of the great cloud of witnesses that's in Hebrews, and he was like Chase, those are your black cloud of witnesses. Look at the black folks that are in there. He's like, have you heard of Moses the Black? And then he starts to tell me about Moses the Black, who was a desert father, who they were asking a question about. So there were several monks. He was a monastic monk, and there was a question about someone's belonging in community. Right? They had done something, and they went to Moses the Black, who was African, and they said, tell us whether or not this brother deserves to be in community. Can you come vote on this? And then he says, all right, I'll get to you. And then he never comes. And then so they send another messenger, and then he never comes. And finally they go themselves, everyone goes, and then they're like, yo, you're gonna come back with us, like to settle this dispute, So they rose up on him. And then he says, all right, I'll come. Just give me 1 second. And he goes and he fills up a bag full of sand, and he's dragging this sand all the way on the walk back. And then they get to the place where they're going to make this decision about this person who wants to stay in community with who they're trying to cast out. And then before he casts his vote, he says, you're asking me about the sins of this individual when my sins are pouring out all over this place. And there's sand all over this floor. My sins have been poured out on this whole journey, and you're asking me about this person over here. And then he said, Chase, Moses the Black is in your great cloud of witnesses. And he said, Desmond Tutu is in your great cloud of witnesses. And I said, oh gosh, Eric, you don't even know Desmond Tutu. There's a rumor he was related to my family. Desmond Tutu presided over my grandfather's funeral. There's a picture of Desmond Tutu blessing my grandfather in his coffin at his funeral, right? And so he's like, Desmond Tutu is in your great cloud of witnesses. So I start getting hype, and I'm like, and I'm picturing and envisioning this great cloud of witnesses, and it's all my ancestors cheering me on. Like, and no matter what space I'm in, even if I'm in a predominantly white space, that great cloud of witnesses is saying, Chase, you got this. Chase, you got this, and then some. Do you know who you come from? Do you know where you have been? Do you know what's inside of you? So for me, the ancestors, they're my hype people. They're my hype people saying like, yo, you got this. You got this. Even if this is a new space for you, it is not new to us. And our spirit lives in you and can move through you and minister through you. So yeah, that's how that informs my faith. They hype me up. So they're going to hype me up all the way to service. I'm going to get vested and preach one more time.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to go.
Thank you,
That's how
Chase.
they inform me.
I was like, I'll do this. Oh. I think similarly, it's a very not tangible thing. I think for so long I was like turned off to even like thinking about the ancestors or just people where I come from and the general path in which I get to now walk. But like I can't help but think of what I get to do and the stages I get to stand on and the things I get to speak, and think about the people who couldn't do that or who paved for me to get to that stage or who made way for me to be able to be where I'm at now. And I've had a few experiences of people, you know, referring to me as like any type of essence of Maya Angelou, and I just like that embodiment. I have the privilege of being able to have, and yet not even the full reality of like being able to step into it. And so I think, you know, growing up, it was like very much so like, we don't touch that, you know, like we don't, they died, they're gone, you know, they're not a part of what we're living and breathing and existing as now, but I don't know how not to experience that, you know, like I don't know how not to acknowledge who I've come from and where I've come from. And even my name, Estoria Lita, I literally have my grandmother's names, you know, who I've never met and never had that experience, but there's a part of me that I think embodies them in ways that I don't even fully realize. And so I think there's just, yeah, I love what she said about a great cloud of witnesses, and it's just this essence that kind of carries us and urges us forward to continue this path that they probably just chiseled away at, and now we get to shovel, which is a blessing. Yeah.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I know some of you need to go to 11:30 service. What I want to do, just in honor of this question, is just for us to hold, if I had a plant and some water, I'd do a formal libation, but just to speak the name of an African ancestor. So it could be, if you're not of African descent, it could be a historical figure who you admire or respect, but someone who has transitioned. And so we just want to speak their name. And I'll start with George Floyd.
Zelda Kennedy.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Thank each of you.